Morning, everybody. I should stop looking at Twitter and actually pay attention to my script and what's happening on my own show. Morning, everyone. Happy Hump Day. Welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's assistant editor, Jason Beattie, who's paying more attention. Morning, Jason.
Hello, Susie.
Now, this is the People's Paper Review, so get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to wait for us to apologise without saying what for or why we were wrong exactly. So, what have you got today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the unfolding horror at a Hull funeral parlour where police say they have found 35 bodies, and only some of them seem to belong to people who are supposed to have been buried or cremated. In some cases, their ashes have even been given to their relatives. Now, more on that in the paper, but 2 people have been arrested and released without charge, so it's not really wise for us to discuss that today for legal reasons. But let's stay on the subject of death and how we manage it. And on page 2, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, has promised campaigner Esther Rantzen a vote on assisted dying if he becomes Prime Minister. We've got a clip of that promise, and here it is.
We are going to commit to this. I'm personally committed to it because, as you know, the current law is a complete prohibition ban on assisted suicide, and then it's left essentially and in reality to the chief prosecutor, so me when I was sitting in that role for 5 years, to decide which cases go forward and which don't, and I tried to get that right in all the cases I saw. But that's not a very good way of doing it. It ought to be for Parliament to decide. I'm personally in favour of changing the law. I can give you my commitment, Esther, absolutely, that if we are privileged enough to win the election, then we will make time for this vote. It'll be a conscience vote, obviously, but that's why cross-party support is going to be really important.
Wow. Jason, can you take us through this a little bit? What's Esther asking for exactly, and what does she want?
Oh, this is complicated, Susie. Now, in the last
I asked you to explain it, Jason.
10 years or so, various countries around the world have moved to legalise assisted dying. The Netherlands was one of the first. Canada's followed. It's now becoming more widespread. Most South American countries, they've been quite advanced on this. Britain, the UK government hasn't yet committed to it because it's such a difficult moral issue, which to make it even harder is an extraordinarily emotional issue. Now, I've never been in the situation of having a relative who has asked to end their life early, so but I'm fully conscious about how difficult that decision must be. The problem is, how do you craft a law, and taking into fact all the difficulties around this? So what Keir Starmer is doing is the easy bit, which is saying, look, we'll give this to Parliament. It's a free vote. MPs vote with their conscience. And then they could decide whether or not we will follow suit with other countries. That's the easy bit. The difficult bit is the crafting of a law. Now, the reason why is one, who gets to decide, what sort of condition do you have to be in before to allow assisted dying? So at the moment, let's say in some countries, they go, if the death is foreseeable in the near future, i.e. we're talking months, then it's legal. But what do you do if you have a chronic illness? Is that a justifiable case for assisted dying or not? And how severe is that chronic illness? That's really difficult to legislate for. Yeah. Then when it gets more complicated, because then you have to say, who makes this decision? So in some countries, it's just the doctor. Now, do we want doctors to be in a position to say yes or no, that person's life can be ended? Do they want to be in that position? Is it fair to put doctors in a position of playing God? Yeah. And then how do you ensure they are making the decision correctly? Yeah. So, and then the third factor, which makes it very complicated, is there are instances, and they're quite common, of people saying, yes, I want to end my life, and then going on to live for another 10 years or so, if not longer. Now, are we in danger then of prematurely ending people's lives? Now, you can see why this is such a kind of impossible thing to resolve in many respects.
Yeah. And so Esther, who is a lifelong campaigner for lots of different things, now has terminal lung cancer and has spoken, although she's full of vim and spirit now, she plainly wasn't able to get to see Keir in person, which is why he was having that phone call with her on the film that we just saw. Wants to say, when it gets to the end, I just don't want those last few weeks. Really, I don't want those last few weeks where I'm comatose or I'm in agony. I don't much fancy that. We do have a situation in this country legally where lots of people do get shuffled off by the doctor. And that is allowed, and it happened to my grandmother. So get into the comments, everybody. What do you think? Did this happen to you? So my grandmother, when I was a child, she had breast cancer. And in order to have enough morphine to stop the pain as it grew and grew, as it got towards the end of life, that amount of morphine kills you after a point. And the doctors know this. And the doctors know they're taking away their pain, and that the inevitable consequence will be that you are suppressing some of the body's functions and you end up dying from it. That is a form of being God, I suppose. It is a form of assisted dying in a way, but there are plenty of people for whom, maybe you've shortened their life by a few days. There are plenty of people who would like you to shorten it by a few weeks, please. And we've also had cases. There was a lady who went to Dignitas, I think, in Switzerland a little while ago, who had very severe mental illness and wanted to take her own life. And where do we go when there's not physically anything wrong with you, and perhaps you can have your mind changed in some way? The Isles says, please don't legalize murder. Would mean that you do have the intent to kill, but you do also have someone's consent to take their life. That would have to be required. So it's not murder quite in either the biblical or legal sense, but it does get really messy. So what Esther has asked for is that we'd have a talk again about this assisted dying process, that there is ways, as Jason was just saying, of making the law so restrictive, if you like, that it can only really happen in certain circumstances. And it's very much up to people when that happens, and you have lots of safeguards built in. But one of the interesting things here is you've got Keir basically making an on-air promise for a vote if he becomes a prime minister. Now, I'm not aware he's ever said anything that strong about what will happen under his government before, that something that definite would occur. He always sort of caveats things by saying, as he did there, really, it's not guaranteed, but if we do, kind of thing. Do you think, Jason, that his certainty on this, such as it is informed rather by the fact that his own mother had a very chronic disease for many years? Do you think that's, he said personally he's in favour of it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Susie, or whether, as he also referred to his experience as head of a Crown Prosecution Service, where he was having to try and navigate something which, quite rightly, he pointed out should be the decision of Parliament. I have incredible sympathy for people who are living the final days of their life in complete agony, and there's no quality of life whatsoever, and they know the condition they're suffering from is terminal, and I can totally understand why the personal agony they're going through, and the fact that the pain they're putting their loved one through as well. You can see the argument in favour of assisted dying. My concern is there a way of drafting a law which takes in the issues I raised earlier, but it's also, and this is the other thing which a lot of campaigners are concerned about, is does not become a slippery slope. So we devalue life so much that actually, rather than the specific circumstances we've been talking about, which is somebody who has only a few days or weeks left to live and is in great discomfort and pain, and where you can see the case, to a kind of slightly broader range of conditions which people may feel pressurized into.
Yeah, imagine if someone was in a situation where they were becoming paraplegic, for example, and they were taking a lot of care, and their loved ones were having to do a lot of work for them and were very, very strained, and they didn't want to end their life, really, and they could still get some pleasure from seeing grandchildren or something like that, and they just felt under some kind of pressure to say, I can't watch you do this anymore. I think I have to end it for your sake, and all this kind of stuff. And it gets really sticky and horrible. And we've got another story which was reported on a while ago of a couple called Dennis and Mavis Ecclestone. Now Dennis was very ill. And he said he wanted to shorten his life, and Mavis didn't want to go on without him. And so they decided to have a suicide pact, and they were both going to take their own lives. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at these things, Mavis survived. And that meant that she stood trial for murder, which is just, there they are together in hospital beds, I think, after their attempted effort to take their own lives. Dennis, as I said, did pass away. Mavis did not, and she stood trial. And that's one of those things that Keir was talking about. How do you judge this? If you love someone, you would want to take their suffering and their pain away. Many, many juries are going to say, acquit, thank you very much, especially when it's someone who's elderly and there's no real motive, not financial or anything else in it. But we put them through this kind of trauma and try people for murder. That doesn't seem quite right. We need at least a different sort of charge, I would have thought, a different sort of crime for if you want to criminalise that. Trevor says you can put an animal down, but not yourself. It's crazy. We see a dog in pain and help it, yet a loved one we have to watch suffer. I know exactly how you feel, Trevor. I had to put my dog to sleep a couple of years ago, and I felt that although I took a lot of pain on myself doing it, I felt that I was doing a good thing for him. And it sort of alleviated the grief a bit, and I didn't have to watch him suffer any longer. But could we do that with our own parents? I don't think I could. I don't think I could. Paul said, Britain is famed for treating their animals better than their people when we put our pets to sleep. We do have this kind of dichotomy, don't we, where, a dumb animal who can't speak for themselves, it has their suffering taken away, and then a human who can and enunciate and declare that they've had enough and they really want to stop it now, doesn't have the same right. Is it too much to hope, I suppose? One thing that Keir mentioned there is that it would be a free vote, it would be a conscience vote in Parliament under his leadership, where MPs and peers would be able to vote according to their conscience, and would perhaps hear some reasoned, careful, thoughtful arguments, as we're having today, and as they're probably happening in the comments, about how this could work. Is it a bit too much to hope, Jason, that we'll ever get debates like that in Parliament again?
I think it's possible. I mean, I think MPs generally are much maligned sometimes for, we see the kind of rowdiness at PMQs. We don't see actually behind the scenes they're working collaboratively on committees, that they are, they're having to make kind of difficult decisions, and they do debate them at length. But it's just that, that's not what grabs the headlines. They've done this before. I remember a very young front bencher called Yvette Cooper made her name actually by leading a debate on stem cell research, which had the same sort of issues behind it in many respects. And it was an incredibly thoughtful debate. So it can be done. And, when there will be the odd kind of, attention seeker, the odd idiot who will make some kind of, very off-color, churlish comment probably in the debate. But I suspect generally it would actually be kind of it would be conducted with quite a lot of dignity.
Maybe something then that could actually restore faith in Parliament a bit after the last few years that we've had. Whatever the outcome of that vote, we could all have a little bit more faith. I think it's the kind of thing people would actually sit and watch several hours of if they were able to have that kind of discussion, because there's an awful lot of passion about it. Paul says the issue could be doctors' Hippocratic oath to do no harm. What doctor would assist the world that YouTube doesn't allow but begins with S? Okay. Also, people could be pressured. What about mental health? That's all there to be discussed, isn't it, Paul?
These are all very good points by Paul. Yeah. And as I said earlier, is it fair to put the pressure on doctors to make these decisions? And it's not just people with mental health problems. There's a lot of people with disabilities are very concerned about this changing the law. They already feel that they're undervalued by society. And this, by legislating this way, it could actually make them feel kind of even more undervalued, and that's a genuine concern.
That euthanasia was something which actually led in part to the Holocaust. So the Nazis started a process of euthanasia called Action T4, in which people like me who have epilepsy were first sterilised and then euthanized allegedly sometimes with their family permission, but usually just without. And that gave them the way to practice mass deaths, mass murder. Basically, they invented Zyklon B gas and so on, and moved it all into the concentration camps, and the Holocaust began. So euthanasia and kind of perfecting the race, as it were, is all part of the same kind of thing. It's, you have to find a way of having perhaps the sympathy and the compassion that doesn't actually lead to where it has led in the past. So it's a very nuanced debate. Hopefully we get it at some point. Now, thank you for that, everybody, and thank you for your questions. Now on to the main story of the day, and it's about race, I suppose, and it's this festering row in the Tory party we've got at the moment. After the Guardian, a team led by Pippa Crerar, former party pooper of this parish, I love saying that, reported that their big donor, Peter Hester, who was given £10 million to the Conservative, he's pictured there on the left of that photograph, was caught at an event 5 years ago saying that Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women and she should be shot. Now, Jason, this has been reported to the police now. They'll investigate this, but it hasn't really stopped the Tories talking about it. And they've had lots of things to say about this, haven't they? What have they said exactly?
Gosh, if you want a kind of textbook example of how to handle something so badly, the Tories have done it here. So, as you said, the Guardian originally exposed that Frank Hester, the Tories' largest donor,
Frank, not Peter. Sorry, Peter Hester, if you're out there.
£10 million had made these really quite vile comments, which were clearly racist and sexist. And the original Tory line, this was from Downing Street, was the comments were wrong and unacceptable. They weren't racist or gender-based. They then sent out ministers to defend this line on broadcast interviews, and they looked deeply uncomfortable having to do this. So Paul Stride, the Work and Pension Secretary, and Graham Stewart went out to defend this line. It was obviously unsustainable. Then various MPs from across party, but noticeably Kwasi Kwarteng and Kemi Badenoch, the Trade Secretary, both said, look, these comments are clearly racist. At which point Downing Street had to change its line. So at about 6 p.m. yesterday evening, they said, yes, we accept now that Hester's comments were racist and wrong, quote unquote. But they're not going to give the money back.
This is sort of astonishing to me. I could imagine that kind of, well, that's just, it's not racist, under Boris Johnson lasting for a bit, and then maybe when someone like Kemi Badenoch, who is a woman who is black, comes out and says no, it is racist, that he'll go, that's racist. Yeah, I could see that happening under a different prime minister. But we have a prime minister who doesn't matter the colour of his skin, but he is brown. He has spoken about racism in the past. He has said he has experienced it himself, and he knows how it feels. Is he just not paying any attention? Did this just somehow go past him? Why did it take Kemi Badenoch to say this was racist before Rishi Sunak said it was racist?
I mean, as a kind of basic communication strategy, yeah, the first thing you should ask is, like, what's the truth and what's the right thing to do here? The second thing you should ask is there anything else this guy may have said which we don't know about, which could embarrass us further down the line? Oh, lo and behold, the Guardian this morning found he's made even more not worse comments, but similar comments. Yeah, while insisting he's not racist, and they haven't thought that through. And then the other bit I don't get is it's just. If you're kind of like, the worst thing you can do is send ministers out to defend something which is indefensible. And because one, you kind of like, you anger them, but also the next time you're in trouble, they're not going to do it again.
No.
Go, look, we had to defend this really difficult line, which was we are comfortable doing, and now you're expecting us to kind of support. So it drains support from the Prime Minister. It makes him look weak and looks like he's been kind of knocked about by his cabinet. You know, I mean, Kemi Badenoch is made no secret she's ambitions to be leader one day. Yeah, it's just been so badly handled all the way. And the worst thing is they haven't even put the story to bed. So the key thing here, is should a political party take money from somebody who's said something which is racist? I mean, generally speaking, I don't think they should. I don't know about you, Susie. I think there should be some sort of standards in politics.
Yeah. But then again, it's 10 million, and that's so much money.
In an
if
election,
Tories were to hand it back, they couldn't fight the election.
Yeah,
they'd be broke.
Well, not completely broke, but 10 million is a lot of money. So so now we've got the situation where they got ministers out this morning, and the question they're being asked again and again is, should you take this money? And they're going, oh, we think we should. And then they asked, what happens if Hester offered you another 10 million? Would you take that? And the post office minister, who we're going to talk about later, Kevin Oliver, was going, oh, yes, we would.
What? What? Even after all this? Oh my God! It's like saying, would you convict another sub-postmaster on the evidence of the Horizon scandal? Yeah, definitely. No, you say no.
But they put themselves in this situation because they haven't thought it through.
Oh gosh. Mike says, is the Conservative line now that Frank Hester's words were racist, but his money isn't? It's sort of astonishing. And the thing is, it brings back this. What do you think, everybody? Do you think more or less of the Conservative Party after this? There are elements of our society which some of us would call racist, which say they're not racist, but they're just speaking their minds, that kind of thing, and who like Lee Anderson and who want to vote reform maybe and have an issue with immigration. They say it's not racism, it's just raising a point and all the rest of it. This issue is, it really does bring back like that the image of the Tory party as the nasty party, which Theresa May called it all those years ago, shortly before, she's bailed or made it a bit nasty herself. But there's all this talk of handing back the 10 million. What interests me, Jason, really is not so much whether they've spent that money already or anything else, but what Frank Hester got in return for this racist cash, because we have seen over the past couple of years, really, that the Tories are being a lot more racist about things. We could say that some of their policies are far more about othering and difference and foreigners and all that kind of stuff, and that people of colour have experienced all sorts of more problems as a result of government policies, not just the Rwanda bill, but I mean things that are happening in the UK as well. Is that in part perhaps why the Tories are being a bit more racist? Can you buy more racism in politics, do you think?
I mean, I don't know what he's got wants from his donation, but if I was a Labour strategist, I would be getting MPs or encouraging kind of journalists to ask the Tories again and again, do you think that normally large donors to the Tory party end up with a knighthood or a peerage? Do you think that Frank Hester is deserving of a peerage? I mean, that's the question I'd be asking.
Yeah. Would you want him in the House of Lords?
Yeah.
Would you want him in a VIP lane? Would you want him?
And then I'd have to ask, what sort of comments are so unacceptable that you would actually, what conditions would you give the money back? How low do you have to go before you actually decide that you don't, this money is tainted?
If you've suggested shooting an MP, and there has been an MP shot and killed in recent years, there's been another one stabbed and murdered in recent years. Perhaps it's the kind of thing that shouldn't be said. God crikey, I mean, how much worse, like you say, can it be, really? And it's got to be pointed out, Diane herself has lost the Labour whip, and she's being investigated for comments that she made about the traveller community. So, I mean, it's on all sides to some extent. Paul says, in Britain, money is multicoloured. This is the Tory understanding of diversity and inclusion. Quite a good point there, Paul, I should think. Probably right. Nick says, there was a time when this would have been shocking, but not anymore. You're right. It is a bit kind of, oh, God, it's more of that, isn't it, about it? We need a general election, says Nick. Now, if they hand this money back, Rishi's going to have to find someone else to pay for his helicopter flights, because that's one of the things that the cash has been spent on. He could pay for it himself. He's probably richer than Frank Hester anyway. But to the public, I mean, how does this all look? Labour has had an issue with Diane Abbott a little while ago, which they're investigating, and it's got this gross and appalling problem with anti-Semitism in its ranks. But Keir does at least look like he's trying to fix that. He keeps saying that is not our party, we have reinvented ourselves. When or can Rishi say the same thing?
I think that's a very good point. I think one of the things is, whatever criticism you have of Starmer, he did act and is still acting to rid the legacy of anti-Semitism from the Labour Party. But what's interesting is the way the firmness of Starmer contrasted with Sunak. And you thought, like, we had the same issue with Lee Anderson when he made the kind of Islamophobic comments about Sadiq Khan. But, the line from Downing Street was, these words were unacceptable. But they said exactly the same words about Hester, but then they wouldn't explain why they were unacceptable. And there's a clear weakness on behalf of Sunak to confront the Islamophobia and racism within his own party, and I think that's a problem. And I know why. It's because the Tories are so febrile, and his position is so weak that he doesn't want to antagonize the right of his party anymore. But the problem is you keep appeasing them, and if you fail to take a stand, in the end you look weak, and it damages the party. But that's the situation we're in. I mean, I'm not, quite happy.
It seems astonishing to me that there's anybody, brown, white, pink or green, otherwise, in charge of an organisation that sees a part of that organisation become more and more racist, more openly nasty, calling for people to be shot, and doesn't feel able to stick his neck out and say, that's not okay. It's just... That's not the job. The whole point of leadership is that you lead, isn't it? And that you set the example, and you say, I don't care. Well, I'm in a weak position. Let's say if it was me, okay, Susie Boniface, just freelancer. I don't have any influence over the Daily Mirror whatsoever. No one pays much attention to me. I'm not a staff member. I'm not the editor or anything else. But if there was something that I thought was just so off colour, if the Mirror had on the front page, let's bring back the forced sterilisation of epileptics, say, I would put my damn hand up and say, I don't think you should do that. I'm not even a leader. I'm not elected. I'm not trying to sell anything to anybody. Why is Rishi such a... I know he's, like you say, he's in a weak position, but surely he can see what's wrong and say what's wrong. Otherwise, what's the point of him? Well, it just says it all, doesn't it? It says it all. Thanks, Jason. I think we'll clip this one for social media. Everyone can see it. Yeah. It's just, it's so depressing, isn't it, really? But we have managed to find some good news for you in the world. It was maybe going to be Andrew Tate actually coming back to, get convicted in this country as well as Romania if he gets a chance. But we found something else for you. Some good news, and here it is. Breathe. Right. Now, if there was a season 2 of Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, they could cover the constant government squabbling and finger pointing that followed Mr. Bates 1. But it would be a rather grand finale if they could finally say all the sub-postmasters had been exonerated. And that process starts today with legislation beginning in Parliament to formally clear all of those who are dragged into the Horizon scandal and wrongly accused of false accounting and fraud. Give all of them, even those who weren't convicted, some compensation. Now, Jason, is this proof, and I'm being very optimistic here, is this proof that even the Tories can eventually do something right, even if it takes ITV and Toby Jones to convince them to do it?
Yeah, possibly. I know. The reason I've been cautious, Susie, is on paper, this is a really good thing to do. So they're exonerating the people who are wrongly convicted. That's great, but it requires legislation. And it now is all down to the government to make sure this legislation gets through before the general election. Yeah. Now, they should be able to do that. They can, if they want, and they have done this before, they can legislate in a couple of days. It's usually a bit more protracted than that. Yeah. And it's got cross-party support. There's no reason why it shouldn't, but they've got to find time for it. So this is the first stage, and let's see. But I mean, I think it was quite noticeable that Kevin Jones, Labour MP, who's been one of the great champions of the sub-postmasters and mistresses, yeah, he said, "Look, this has got to be on the statute book as quickly as possible." And but it is on paper, and this is good news. Let's see what happens in practice.
Yes, well, it could be that they're able to get Brexit laws and so on through in under a week or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I don't see why they couldn't do this if they really wanted to. And I suppose we'll just have to. I think they wouldn't want to call an election while this was still going through, because it would just look really bad for them.
Well, they could call an election any day now, Susie. So
they could, and in order to meet May the 2nd, the latest day they call it is March the 26th. They've got another 13 days. So unless, but I would suggest maybe, I'm starting to change my mind a bit on this, but if they were to call an election while the postmasters thing is still going on, it would play badly for them. And so I think they might want to get that through first.
I think they want to try desperate to get the Miranda bill through as well. But here we go.
Well, we'll have to. I guess we're all assent next week, I think. We had one other comment just come up there, and I didn't see it before it got flashed down. Nick says, Sunak's going to call a general election today. I can feel it in my bones, although at my age, it might just be arthritis. It might be, Nick. It might be. I don't think it's going to be today. But let's see how the next couple of weeks go.
The golden rule of political punditry, Susie, is if I say the election's going to be in October, it'll be in May. If I say it's going to be in May, it'll be in October. So it's fine.
Yes, I know. And I've been saying it's going to be May for ages. So I'm probably going to be wrong. But we'll have to wait and see how it all turns out. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking part. Thank you, Jason, for taking us through all that, some of the complicated stuff as well. Come back on these channels at noon for Prime Minister's Questions, when Keir is frankly going to have a whole series of open goals, whether it's about Frank Hester or letting people out of prison early, or God knows what else that he could actually get Rishi at Prime Minister's Questions. But tune in. Sorry?
Lee Anderson as well.
Oh, Lee Anderson as well. And he's
choice.
Just generally speaking, just the absolute disaster that the budget turned into as well. So there's loads of stuff. Keir's going to have to pick which particular blade he wants to hurl across the dispatch box. So come back and have a look at that later on. If you're listening on podcast, please leave us a review so other people can find us. And we'll see you again next Monday for another edition of the News Agenda. Until then, everybody, tatty bye.